Opinion defeating seamless integration of terror drugs in democracies. Terrorism is senseless violence in which civilians are often the target, like the recent Pahalgam incident in Kashmir. Militant groups that engage in transnational terrorism employ disparate terrorist tactics for several disruptive motives. Their transnational terrorist operations are underpinned by a strategic need to influence intended audiences abroad in achieving their process and outcome goals. Depending on the militant group's short and long-term objectives, the type of attack indicates the type of terrorist strategy they will employ. At its core, terrorism is a senseless, violent discourse, aimed at influencing the policies and support of an intended audience beyond the immediate victims. These targeted third-party audiences can include governments domestic or foreign, opposition political parties, the passive public, and the supporting global religious constituency of the militant group. There is a plethora of international agreements, covering all facets of terrorism, including the intractable problem of narco-terrorism. The major international agreements are 1988 UN Drug Convention, United Nations Convention Against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances. 1988 UN Single Drug Convention, United Nations Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. 1961 as amended by the 1972 Protocol Union Psychotropic Substances Convention, United Nations Convention on Psychotropic Substances. 1971 UNCOC Union Convention Against Corruption. 2003 UNTOC Union Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. 2000 and its supplementing protocols. Trafficking in Persons Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. Migrant Smuggling Protocol against the smuggling of migrants by land, air, and sea, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. Firearms Protocol against the illicit manufacturing of and trafficking in firearms, their parts and components and ammunition, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. Significantly, both India and Pakistan are signatories to all these international agreements. In addition, a significant recent initiative is the Global Coalition to Address Synthetic Drug Threats, an international partnership which the United States launched in mid 2023. In September 2024, the United States hosted a Leaders Summit at the UN General Assembly to mark the first year of the Global Coalition, which now has 164 participating member states and 15 international organization partners working to disrupt the supply chain for synthetic drugs and detect emerging drug threats. The United States also spurred new global action against the synthetic drug crisis at the high-level segment of the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs (CND) in March 2024, which marked the first time a U.S. Secretary of State attended a meeting of the UN's drug policy-making body. Also, the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Counterterrorism identifies state sponsors of terrorism. Countries determined by the Secretary of State to have repeatedly provided support for acts of international terrorism are designated pursuant to 3 Law Section 1754C of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2019, Section 40 of the Arms Export Control Act, and Section 620A of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. Taken together, the 4 main categories of sanctions resulting from designation under these authorities include restrictions on U.S. foreign assistance, a ban on defense exports and sales, certain controls over exports of dual-use items, and miscellaneous financial and other restrictions. Currently, there are 4 countries designated under these authorities: Cuba, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, Iran, and Syria. Is it not surprising that the name of Pakistan, which is a global hub of narcotics, is significantly missing? The value and utility of all the above agreements, dialogues, and pronouncements are all highly debatable. Western strategic interests are only articulated and protected in these deliberations, but Asian and African countries always get a raw deal. Union Home Minister Amit Shah on February 5 said that the narcotics network is providing support to infiltrators and terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir. He said that there was a need to initiate prompt action with alacrity and rigor against terror funding from the proceeds of the narcotics trade. As JK continues to grapple with the menace of drug abuse, authorities have revealed that an alarming 1,978 drug-related cases have been registered in 202,425 alone, and over 2,800 persons have been held in connection with them. This is part of a larger crackdown on drug traffickers and suppliers aimed at dismantling the nexus. Notably, drug abuse has picked up in JK over the last few years. About 14.09 lakh persons in JK are affected by substance abuse, including addiction to alcohol, cannabis, opioids, and inhalants. Around 1,514 cases were registered in 2024, and 2,260 arrests and 274 detentions were made under the NDPS Act. But the ground reality in narcotics enforcement in JK is disturbing. In February 2025, the Jammu, Kashmir Ladakh High Court upheld the trial court's acquittal in a case involving the possession of contraband in commercial quantity. The court emphasized that non-compliance with mandatory provisions such as proper sampling, immediate reporting, and informing the accused of the grounds for arrest makes the prosecution's case defective. It criticized the lack of diligence in investigations under the NDPS Act, noting every day, we hear reports of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances being seized, particularly from the youth. However, it is alarming that many genuine cases under the NDPS Act result in acquittals due to casual, unfair, and flawed investigations. The bench further stressed that cases under the NDPS Act are frequently handled by incompetent officers, leading to breaches that weaken prosecution arguments, undermine justice, and erode public confidence in the legal system. This is just one of the many cases in which charges against drug dealers have fallen in court. In the last 6 years, more than 13,186 persons have been arrested under the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances NDPS Act. Yet, the official data shows only 4 convictions have been secured, an abysmally low rate of just 0.03 per cent. Yet, the situation has barely changed, with legal experts and officials arguing the problems run deeper. They point out the law is stringent against drug trafficking, but the burden of proof is higher, requiring highly professional investigations. This law is laced with technicalities, and a single contradiction in the statement of witnesses erodes the credibility in the eyes of the law. The above problem, pointed out by the court, stems from inadequate training of investigators. Also, the government needs to bring in different legislation to handle cross-border narco-terror cases. The situations in Punjab and Kashmir are very alarming. In May 2025, the Punjab police, in Tarn Taran, made a major recovery of 85 kilograms of heroin near the border village of Gurinda. This is the biggest heroin seizure of 2025 so far, smuggled from Pakistan. Similarly, in May 2025, the Border Security Force BSF officials seized heroin valued at Rs 5 crore after intercepting a drone from Pakistan near the international border in Rajasthan's Sri Ganganagar. The consignment, believed to have been sent from Pakistan, was found near the barbed wire fencing along the international border. On April 2, a crashed drone was found in a field near Chowk 11F, Sheikh Sarpal border post, Karanpur. It contained 500 gm of heroin. On March 20, 3 kilograms of heroin were recovered near the Rawala area village 12 KND by BSF personnel after a drone drop. On May 18, 2025, the BSF successfully crossed a significant landmark of recovering the 100th Pakistani drone, including 111 kilograms of heroin, 60 weapons, 14 hand grenades and more than 10 kilograms of high explosives from entering Indian territory. In 2024, the BSF recovered 294 such drones along the Indo-Pak border. Investigations conducted over the past 4 years have indicated that Pakistan-based terror groups were involved in sending drugs and weapons using drones at different locations along the border in Punjab. No other country in the world is facing such a grave narco-terror problem as India. An array of terror organizations, sporting Arabic names, operates near the India-Pakistan border, with global ambitions and a willingness to export terror and war from their base of operations. Though the recent Operation Sindoor delivered a strong punch, terror forces have not been completely obliterated. They will regroup quickly with continued support from Pakistan, to keep alive the specter of narco-terrorism in Kashmir and Punjab. So, it is not sufficient to be on the front lines of combating drug smuggling and making waves with seizures. Combating narco-terrorism in the border states of Rajasthan, Punjab, and Jammu Kashmir needs a new law and a different set of yardsticks. The role of the judiciary in the challenge of fighting terrorism needs complete reconsideration and revision. Can and should the courts decide the proper way to fight terrorism? Will constant judicial interference burden the fight against terrorism? Which law is applicable to counter-terrorist activities and narco-terrorism? Is it the law of war or is it the routine criminal law that needs application? What is the plausible balance between human rights and public safety in this era of terrorism? What India sorely needs is a model for counter-terrorism adjudication, taking into account the terror problem in all its facets, including narco-terrorism and money laundering within the legal context. A possible model is the jurisprudence of the Israeli Supreme Court, developed in recent years. The Supreme Court of Israel has dealt many times with questions regarding the role of the court in the era of terrorism. Counterterrorism has become a part of daily reality in Israel, very much like in Kashmir. The approach of the Israeli judiciary is unique in comparison with the judges and courts in other democracies. The different forms of counterterrorism measures reviewed by the Israeli Supreme Court cover preventive measures such as detention and arrest, assigned residence of inhabitants, house demolitions, and the separation fence interrogation methods. The course of actual combatant activity provisions for civil liability of the armed forces and electoral laws banning candidates who support terror activities. For example, in many cases, following a terrorist attack, the IDF demolishes the house of the terrorist. It does this mainly to deter terrorists. This measure is administrative rather than part of any criminal procedure, and is considered severe because it often results in the loss of housing for an entire family, even though the family may not be involved in the terrorist activity. As a matter of practice, the IDF has also used this tactic in cases where the terrorist died or escaped from the country. In numerous cases, petitioners requested the Israeli court to cancel these demolition orders. Upon review, the court ruled that this counterterrorism method can be used to deter terrorists, but not to punish them, and that no international or domestic law renders the practice illegal. The fact that other people, namely the families of the terrorists, were affected by this action was not found to make the action itself illegal under international law. A few states in India have adopted a similar procedure, which goes by the name of bulldozer justice. But the Supreme Court promptly intervened and termed it a lawless, ruthless state of affairs, and issued pan-India guidelines. The common man who is facing the brunt of terrorism and narco-terrorism is facing a conundrum. Are laws and their interpretations tilted in favor of the terrorists? It is because of the soft approach of the U.S. judiciary that the American government was compelled to establish the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay in 2002 to house individuals designated as enemy combatants and suspected terrorists following the September 11 attacks. This facility, located within the U.S. Naval Station at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, was intended to hold those captured in the War on Terror, particularly in Afghanistan and Iraq. The primary reason for its creation was to detain individuals outside the legal framework of the U.S. India, which is facing aggravated terrorism, needs to think of setting up a similar Guantanamo facility, to circumvent judicial barriers. Swipe left for next video. Cicero's aphorism that laws are silent during war should be made valid for all terror cases. The writer is former Director General, Multidisciplinary School of Economic Intelligence, and National Academy of Customs, Indirect Taxes Narcotics. Views expressed in the above piece are personal and solely that of the author. They do not necessarily reflect NEWS18's views. Latest blogs.